Hey, this is Last Coffee House. Best of Literature, The Flowers of Evil. I don't know what number this is. I could easily look that up before I do these, but I don't do it. It was written by Charles Baudelaire, the French poet, published in 1857. It apparently reflected the symbolist and modernist movements in poetry. Does anybody read poetry anymore? Most of the newer stuff that I've read when it comes to poetry is just so boring and egocentric. I had no interest in it. But maybe there's some good stuff out there. This particular poetry, though, it has themes relating to decadence and eroticism, and a number of the poems were actually suppressed in France of all places. They suppressed these poems because they thought they were too decadent and erotic. The content, now I read this thing twice, all the way through his collection of poems, and nothing stood out to me. I literally had no highlights of anything of interest to me, either when it came to the writing style or the content. Now, having done this outline about the book now, I think it might have been the translation that I had. The translation might not have been great. Whatever I was reading was so overwrought and had that archaic poetic style that I was just not getting any content out of it, and I just wasn't interested in trying to understand what was going on there. One part of it, the Parisian scenes, were specifically a series of poems, and this sounded interesting, a series of poems representing a 24-hour period in Paris, and it was a critique of the modernization of Paris. So it expressed feelings of estrangement and anonymity and those kinds of things. And actually, Baudelaire is credited with the coining of the term modernity. So he's got that in his cap, that little feather, that's nice. But overall, like I said, I was reading through these and just poem after poem after poem, and nothing was standing out to me. We already did at least one, maybe two collections of poems in our readings here in the Best of Literature. And there has always, in Dickinson and Eliot, I think, who we've done so far, there were always several that just stood out to me that were interesting, that I wanted to put in my pocket so I can break them out at the dinner parties that we can't have anymore. But in this, I don't know, there's just nothing that stood out to me. So for some quotes here, in the foreword to one edition, there's this: "If rape, poison, dagger, and fire have still not embroidered their pleasant designs on the banal canvas of our pitiable destinies, it's because our soul, alas, is not bold enough." So some sentiments there. His ideas and what he wants to talk about and get across is kind of similar to the Decameron in a lot of ways, because the Decameron was taking something that's supposed to be stuffy and just making it about debauchery. But I think Baudelaire actually had a bigger idea than that, than just kind of thumbing his nose at the stuffiness of the medium. I think he really was interested in what modernity was doing to Paris and what it was doing to people in general and where it was all going. I just wasn't getting a whole lot of that out of his poems. There were a number of them about beauty kind of in general and what beauty meant and what was beautiful, and I think that there's a lot about like Satan and things like that in a more positive light. I didn't feel, as I was reading it, I didn't feel like it was something novel or new for the time for some reason. It felt a little staid. And like I said, none of the language was really speaking to me, but it could have been the translation. It really could have been the translation. So in that, just going along those lines, here's one of the poems, and I'm not going to do this translation versus that translation, but I'm doing two different poems, one from the one I read and one from a different translation, and see if it stands out a little better. So this is the possessed one in my translation that I read. "The sun is enveloped in crape. I like it. O moon of my life, wrap thyself up in shade. At will, smoke or slumber, be silent, be stayed, and dive deep down in dispassion's dark pit. I cherish thee thus, but if 'tis thy mood, like a star that from out its penumbra appears to float in the regions where madness careers, fair dagger, burst forth from thy sheath, 'tis good. Yea, light up thine eyes at the fire of renown, or kindle desire by the looks of some clown. Thine all is my joy, whether dull or aflame. Just be what thou wilt, black night, dawn divine. There is not a nerve in my trembling frame but cries, I adore thee, Beelzebub mine." End quote. I didn't start the quote, but that's the end of the quote. So just reading that again, nothing just jumped out to my brain at all. I just caught the Beelzebub at the end. That stands out. You don't generally see that in poems, but it didn't do anything. So this is one from a different translation of his poems. "Spleen, I am like the king of a rainy country. I am like the king of a rainy country, rich but powerless, young yet feeling wintry, no longer flattered by the obsequious bough, bored by my dogs and by every other creature now. Nothing brightens my day, not the hunt, not falconry, me, not the dying people below my balcony. My fool's grotesque ballading does not distract me from my malady. Carved with fleur-de-lis, my bed is a tomb, while sequestered ladies who think every prince a bloom hope by their impudent dress to make me their own. They will never coax a mouse out of this young skeleton. Shall we turn to those who claim they turn lead to gold, though they and we remain the living dead? I bathe in the baths of blood the Romans brought us back in the days of great power and purpose. Even they cannot warm this dazed cadaver, slipping into the place where the salt has lost its savor. End quote. That sounds great. That was nice. It was musical. It was easy to read. The ideas came through very clearly. I was interested in that. I don't know what I did. I spent hours reading this thing twice and I got nothing out of it. And I read that one poem in a different translation and I'm actually interested. Like, that's something that interests me. The concept of a king who's bored of his reign, who has all the power, and now what does he do with it? There's nothing left, and how it would reflect on his ideas of modernity and what it does to humanity in general. That's interesting. So maybe that was the issue. That was not bad at all. Maybe that was the issue. I don't know. Anyway, well, I'm not going to go back. Maybe we'll revisit at some point when I do a breakdown of the whole thing once we finish the whole reading list. But other than that, I'm not going to go back and reread a different translation right now. We're going to keep moving. The next book, what am I talking about the next book? I have to analyze. I think I already analyzed, but I wish I could read French. A new translation came out where it compared the French and the English. It had them on either page as you're reading through it. It would be great if I could do that, but I never learned to do it because I'm a simple American. So, but the second translation sounded so much better to me. So much better. So I will probably go back to it. The themes and the ideas of, decadence and eroticism and the kind of celebration of Satan or Satanism or whatever, those things could be interesting. It could be something that I could have fun with in reading, but I'm not sure. But that's Baudelaire. Next is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So we'll see how that one goes. We've got Hans Christian Andersen and Henry Fielding and a book that I absolutely hated coming after that. And then we're gonna be on a sprint when we get past this chunk coming up here that I don't really know much about. We're gonna be on a sprint though after that for all sorts of books. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. This is The Last Coffee House. Hope all is well. Okay, bye.